Now, Gladys Berejiklian today, in the face of these really high numbers, was out there saying other states are going to have to get used to this. We're all going to have to get used to Delta. We're not getting to zero COVID. That's it. Ahead of National Cabinet tomorrow, mind you. Really a let-it-run policy. I mean, she says she's still getting the numbers down, but not with the vehemence she's been saying in past days. So let's have a listen to that.
Every state is going to have to confront the prospect that once we accept that we can't live in our bubble forever, and of course New South Wales, because of our situation, is confronting this challenge earlier than what we'd hoped we would, to assume that forevermore there'll be zero cases around Australia is, I think, an assumption that nobody can really make at this stage, because we know that once you open up, once borders come down, once there's a prospect of international travel, something we're all looking forward to, we do need to coexist with Delta.
She sort of went on and on with these comments. Gladys Berejiklian really having a shot at every single other state leader. And when Scott Morrison was asked about this, it was almost like Gladys Berejiklian was running the country the way she was talking, or thought she was, in terms of everyone else is going to have to get used to this. So this is life. This is the way we've got to go, living with the virus. Scott Morrison insisting, at least until we get to 80% vaccination, the important thing is to suppress the virus. The national policy is suppression, to get those numbers as close to zero as possible, not maintain them at 600 a day. Have a listen.
Can you tell us what the national public health strategy is at the moment? Because Gladys Berejiklian said this morning that COVID zero is no longer realistic. That's not what Daniel Andrews and Andrew Barr and Mark McGowan are saying. So have we moved past a national approach, or can you articulate what it is?
COVID zero, i.e. there is no COVID in Australia. There's no COVID in quarantine, there's no cases in isolation, there's just zero COVID in Australia. That has never been Australia's goal, ever. What we're seeking to achieve is cases minimised as far as possible, preferably to zero, that are infectious in the community. That's what we'd like to achieve, and we have to act in accordance with that. Now, I think the Premier is being very realistic about what the opportunity to do that now in New South Wales is.
What's happening with New South Wales is they're deviating from the national plan. The national plan at the moment is you minimise or eliminate the spread of Delta. That is where we are at, and that's what New South Wales should be doing. But I just repeat, my preferred option is not to have COVID. I mean, I don't know why that's controversial.
Mark McGowan there with his latest crack at New South Wales. The one thing that Gladys Berejiklian did have very much in tune with the Prime Minister was that upbeat talk about the light at the end of the tunnel and that sort of thing, Andrew.
Yeah, she's borrowed his phrase. And I know the Prime Minister and his team have been concerned there's not enough hope in the messaging of Gladys Berejiklian. I'm not sure there was a lot of hope in her messages about, you know, the virus is just going to run around the place today. But there was in there, she was talking, using the same phrase as the PM. Look, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that's with 80% double vax, which I understand will be around the middle of October.
I know these are challenging times, but I also can see the light at the end of the tunnel. These are difficult times for all of us, and the next few weeks will be hard. But know that once we hit those higher vaccination rates, life will feel much better. Life will look much rosier. And I appreciate what we're going through is difficult. But every state in Australia will have to come to terms with the fact that when you get to a certain level of vaccination and start opening up, Delta will creep in. We can't pretend that we're going to be zero cases around Australia of Delta.
So 1 minute is about opening up. A few minutes ago it was a national emergency. A few minutes ago it was a wake-up call. We're in serious trouble. I'm completely mixed up here.
She regards what is happening now in New South Wales as a national emergency, and our government will be responding accordingly. Yesterday was an absolute wake-up call, and as Dr Chant has said, we can't stress enough that we don't want to go down the path of all these other places overseas where they have literally thousands and thousands and thousands of cases a day.
This New South Wales outbreak, no sign of stopping. It'll be 1,000 cases a day soon, about half the cases of the Victorian second wave. But vaccination is working because there's less deaths, but there is an enormous strain on the hospital system. Dan Andrews actually claims if you just opened everything up, the hospitals would be full in days.
Delta is either you have lockdowns and a very small number of cases, and hopefully you keep driving those down, or you have what New South Wales is dealing with at the moment. And, you know, it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult, and if you were to take off the restrictions that we have now, we'd become Sydney really, really quickly. And if Sydney lifted all their restrictions, or sorry, New South Wales I should say, if they lifted all their restrictions, well then their hospitals would literally be full in a matter of days.